we go, sort of thing. I've already
Yep.
recorded the introduction. I introduced you as let's see, so Tokyo-based vlogger, podcaster, bilingual
Yep.
news geek. You're hosting your own live Japan news show every Sunday at 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time on YouTube. The one word that comes to mind when I see what you're doing, and this was actually talking about, doing some research prior to the show, the one word that strikes me for you is prolific. Because I was trying to create a list. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy, okay, I'm going to give him one word. It's not one word. You have a vlog, but the vlog has like 6 channels. You have a website, each of which has, you have a website that has 6 different titles. You're on SoundCloud, and you're everywhere doing everything. How do you find the time?
Wow, hearing you put it like that, I wonder myself. So I think I've only ever set up really 2 YouTube channels. I've done lots of things on my YouTube channel, but honestly, one of those 2 channels I've let go dead. Back in the early days when I really cared about putting really carefully crafted, edited content onto one channel, people would often set up like a beta channel where they'd just put unedited random stuff. And I did that, but then along the lines, over time when I had a family and everything, I found that this whole live streaming setup, just doing that every week, just going on, turning on the camera, talking for an hour, turning it off, and your video's already done. It was easier for my life to do that. So basically my main channel kind of became my junk channel. I just tried to do my live stream in a more organized way. So I kind of simplified that. I have done different series and so on, which I've put all onto that same channel. Mm-hmm. My webpage, my blog, I must admit, I've let that one kind of go a little bit. Again,
it's a bit 1990s, early 2000s, yeah. But there's a lot on there. I was looking through your best of, and it would, if you were to print it, I would think it'd be about 3 pages long or something. You have a lot of good posts on there, though. And I was going through it. I enjoyed the whole fluency argument that you had about when are you fluent in a language, and I'm going to guess that you're upper 30s, maybe 40s, because those blog posts sound like a young man who is learning a language, has learned a language, but constantly faces that question of like, well, can you speak it? What about in this situation? What about in this? Oh, then you actually don't know the language, do you? And you're going, well, but do you know the language if you're put in that same situation? I love that stuff. I was like, yep, I hear this guy.
I love that you found that. Like, I think this is back in a time when I had some more time to write that. I guess the other thing that's really changed, and part of the reason I don't blog so much now, although there was an overlap period, was that was pre-Twitter. So pre-Twitter, you would read some news and think something was interesting and get an idea in my head, and I'd go and write it free form in a blog. Whereas nowadays, I've got RSS news feeds and conversations on Twitter, and it's definitely not as great a form of human communication, but you cover a lot more ground. And what my live stream is summarizing that. So I've kind of boiled everything down to Twitter and YouTube now. But I must admit, I miss the long form. I mean, it takes time to do, but I actually, and now that you mention that, I remember writing that. It was a long time ago. I think when I wrote that, I was at the stage where I was pretty comfortably fluent by that point. I'd been here more than 10 years and I'd worked in Japanese companies and spoken nothing but Japanese all my life for a long period of time. But it was funny. I was watching other people online and in different places and conversations sort of debate, I'd always get the question, how long did you take to become fluent? I'd get that question a lot from people asking me.
I was going to ask you, actually.
So I wrote that blog because I got that question from so many people. And what I was trying to explain is that it's like, when did you become a fully formed human? You kind of, you get you grow fast in some periods, but you never really stop, right? You're always sort of adding to it with life experience. And that's true of fluency as well. Fluency is just a reflection. I mean, when did you, that's right. I think I'm remembering now. When did you become fluent in your own language? We all assume that we're fluent, since we're kids, but actually kids have limited vocabulary. We survive through the world with limited vocabulary as kids that we just expand through life based on what we need. And it's the same with language, right? So, you can be, I would not be fluent in an accountancy firm. If I went to an accounting firm and tried to talk with the accountants about their jobs, I wouldn't be fluent at that conversation. And it was funny, when I first came to Japan, I was at an IT company where I could barely still, do forms at the city council office, but I could talk about designing a program flow in Japanese because it was what I was talking about every day. I learned the words.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a funny thing. It's not as simple. People who don't speak other languages just assume that, one day you're not, the pill, oh, I can speak Japanese. It's not like the Matrix. I love that, but people kind of assume it's like a switch, and it's absolutely not. And people don't realize that with your own native language, it's not simple either. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting, wow, that's cool. I'm really happy that you found that old blog. I should read it myself.
With that, the fluency argument, and I get this with Chinese, and I see it with Chinese, because one of the big problems that I have learning Mandarin is that I have to qualify it with people that I go back to Canada, and they say, well, what's that say? I'm like, I can't read that because that's traditional Chinese, and I'm studying simplified Mandarin Chinese.
That's how Taiwanese people troll mainland people, right? They put up the traditional characters.
Yeah, and you go to if I go to Shanghai and I try to speak to them, they're like, no, we could speak English because your Chinese is very good. I'm like, okay, but trying, right? Same with even going down to Hong Kong, they all speak English. If I speak Putonghua, like Mandarin Chinese to them, I actually get treated worse than if I were to just speak English. There's that dichotomy, and that has to do with their history. But it is my choice to learn Mandarin, and I'm going to continue learning Mandarin. But one of the things, like for fluency, when I would consider myself to be fluent in quotation marks, is if someone were to give me a piece of Chinese writing, Mandarin writing, Chinese writing, and I would be able to go, I might not know all of what this says, but I could figure it out.
Right. Yeah.
So that to me, I'd be like, okay, I'm basically fluent.
Yeah, which is what kids do. Like in English, if you give them a newspaper and they read like the business pages, they'll skip over the words and put it together what they think it is, based on, that's what we do ourselves in our own native language. It's not like you're doing such a different thing. We're like kids in a foreign language sort of growing. But much respect on the Chinese, by the way. I took some weekend classes on Chinese, but the tonal languages, and Japanese is a little bit tonal, but it's nothing like the degree of Chinese.
But Japanese, because I was trying to, I was supposed to go to Japan for the second time back in February, and I had this idea that I was going to learn Japanese in 6 weeks. I think
I had the same idea with Chinese.
It didn't work, but within 6 weeks, because within 6 weeks I was using a few apps to study, and I was like, okay, Chinese isn't my first language that I've studied. I've studied a few languages, and so I know the idea of how to study a language, and I can do this. I know that. I know how to break it down, time myself, proportion my day, especially with COVID when there was a work stoppage. Well, in January, we had Spring Festival here in China. Do you guys celebrate that in Japan as well? Do you have like a long weekend or like long week off or anything like that?
Yeah. So when you say Spring Festival, so that would be during the same period as Golden Week in Japan, probably. So yeah, we have equivalents at the same time.
Like the Lunar New Year sort of thing?
We don't have the Lunar New Year. The Japan used to have the Lunar New Year. They call it the Old New Year because Japan used to celebrate Chinese New Year, but then they switched to the Western calendar, and but we have a similar vacation to that happens in May. So
okay.
We don't have a break exactly on that, but we get lots of Chinese tourists during that time.
Well, of course, because it's easy, and Chinese people love Japan and Japanese culture.
I know it's complicated, but I do like to see when things are going well. So
just to finish the language point was that with Japanese, you were speaking about the tones of Mandarin. With Japanese, at least with Chinese, when you read a character, it is a character. It is pronounced the same way no matter what. But Japanese, I hit the wall when it became you read the sentence.
3 different possibilities.
And and it's not even like the honorific system. Forget that. It's the watashi became something different, or like there's different the prepositions or the what do you call those things that point towards a place, adverbs, pronouns and stuff like that. They all change in the senses. Like, nope, done, give up, tap. 6 weeks, not possible. I tap out. I'm done.
Yeah. No, Japanese is fine. It's a little bit, yeah, that is the advantage. Chinese has more characters, but they all have like singular readings, whereas in Japanese, they have multiple ancient Chinese readings, which if you use them in compound words, will use one of those multiple possibility of Chinese readings that you have to just rote memorize, or it'll have a Japanese reading if you use it in isolation. So watashi is a Japanese word. So if you have it in isolation, just literally meaning I, it'll be watashi. But if they say something like private, this is private property, it'll be shiritsu, they'll say shi, which sounds kind of Chinese. But I remember when I was learning Chinese, my impression was, apart from the fact that I had to focus so hard to do the e.
Yeah.
But the other thing was there are so many sounds that like, again, apart from in English, we are tone deaf as English speakers, right? We're not raised noticing those differences. So our ears are not trained for it. So I don't know how you develop those muscles, because for me, even in Japanese meaning will change based on tone.
Yeah.
But I kind of wing it, honestly. I've been here for 22 years. So I can I say it the way I always hear it. It's kind of become muscle memory, but I'm not consciously controlling the tone that I'm using. I'm kind of just saying, and sometimes people will say, why did you say hashi? It's hashi. Oh, gee, sorry. I said hashi instead of hashi.
And to me, I'm going, it's the same word.
Well, exactly. So, I remember concentrating so hard with the Chinese tones, but the other thing was you have SI and JI and XI and ZHI and JHI. And I remember practicing in my weekend Chinese classes, and one day I was focusing so hard, but when I just lost concentration for a second, it all just became zhu. And I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore.
I know exactly what you're talking about, because with those, when I hear, you can tell when someone has just started studying Chinese, you pick up on those consonants, those consonant clusters that you just talked about. And I'm like, yep, you don't have it yet.
Yeah.
But even
really
with
focus.
that, the xi and the sh, those ones become very similar, and that's like between like North China to South China. It's only like a 3-hour high-speed train ride from like Beijing to the next city, like Taiyuan, or if you go to a place like Xi'an would have it. Any of those cities along the same parallel as Shanghai, they changed the xi to an sh. So is it sh or is it xi? So it could be 10 or 4. And that's where you kind of go, okay, I don't know. But as long, that's sort of like it within China itself. But that the jia, the j, that takes some practice. I know I get it mixed up too still.
Yeah. No, so much respect at being able to do that. And I must admit, as a party trick, I mean, I'm sure you've found this as well. It's always, it's a nice party trick to when people say, you must get there. You go back to Canada, say something in Chinese, say something in Japanese, show me. And it's kind of like they put you on the spot a little bit. And when I go to America with my coworkers on work trips or whatever, and I'll be speaking to them, people go, wow, that's a white person speaking Asian language. But, I lived here for 22 years, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of, but at the same time, I must admit, even to me, like Japanese as a spoken language, to be honest, there are things that are difficult about Japanese. As you said, the reading system is a mess. A lot like English is. It's like with English, we borrowed words simultaneously from Greek and German, and we don't pronounce K's, and we have a horrible male form language which had got the printing press at the wrong time before it was settled. So we have the same problem in English, but Japanese, they've got the similar problem that they just borrowed from so many places and they never settled anything before they decided to lock it all in.
Yeah.
So that's hard. And honorific system and stuff like that, the fact you have to use totally different languages based on your situation, based on your position in the room and who else is in the room. And if someone leaves the room, then you have to switch again. That's a pain.
Do you get confused with that? Because you're not an English teacher. I'm basically an English teacher. So my honorific system basically hits a certain level. It doesn't go any higher than like principal. If I met a boss, usually they're more like nervous about me than me being nervous about them. Because I'm like, obviously I'm here to speak English, not Chinese, right? So, but does that ever get confusing to you, or do you ever mess it up in like any serious way?
Oh, well, here's the thing. Japanese people mess it up. So this is the thing. I mean,
dirty secret.
Yeah. Well. So frankly, like, so what shocked me was I learned Japanese a little bit at university, and they taught us about this. So I had a basic grasp of business Japanese before I came to Japan as a new graduate. So when I was joined a Japanese company as the only non-Japanese with 100 co-hires, and we were doing business Japanese language classes as part of new hire orientation at this company that I was at. And when they were saying like, so when you're leaving a company before other people, what do you say? And all my university graduate, like elite university grad coworkers, got the wrong answer. And I'm like, how could you get that answer wrong? I mean, even watching TV, you must be able to pick it up, but they don't know. And the point is, they learn it the same way I did. You make the mistake and you get hazed by your boss for doing it, and you just get it beaten into you.
Yeah.
But there are so many of these rules. And the idea that, for example, so you'd think the safest thing is just to be polite all the time. So the biggest mistake and the hardest thing to do is, if I'm talking, you can be kind of neutrally polite. You know, you can exaggerate. If you exaggerate, then it's kind of careful because you don't want to overdo it in the wrong place. But you can be kind of neutral, polite to everybody, and that would work. That a lot of foreigners, that's what we do. But like when you're with like if I'm talking to you and we're in the same company, I might call you son, just because, you know, we're not close friends, but we work together and I want to be friendly. But the moment a customer comes into the room, you become my homie.
Okay.
And when I talk about my homies, I have to say sang. I have to say polite, you know, say politely to this guy. But if I'm saying politely to this guy, it's like I'm telling the customer you have to bow to him or something. Like it's really rude to describe someone from your own team to someone from a different team in an honorific way. You have to speak humbly about your own team. So I basically have to use language which I would use if I was speaking down, even if he's my boss. I have to like cut off the son. I'm not allowed to use son with my own team. And it throws you because you just have this rule that, okay, be polite, call everyone son. But if I call someone on my own team son when someone from a different team is around, I'm being really rude all of a sudden, even though 5 seconds before when the customer wasn't in the room, that's what I had to say. And you switch that up and you add alcohol to it and, you know, and you get hazed. It's pretty harsh. So the point I was about to get is those things are hard, but okay. Japanese fundamentally is an easy language.
And that's what I told my colleague. I'm like, it's so much easier to read. I mean, you can have fun reading it. I mean, I thought it was easy, and then the pronunciation became a problem.
The reading part is hard, but well, the pronunciation is the easy part. This is the thing. It's got one of the narrowest ranges of vowels and voice sounds. It's all done in the throat. They don't use the mouth. You can speak Japanese coherently while biting down on a pencil. You know, it's basically... Everything is linked to only 5 vowels. I've only got 5 vowel sounds. Right. They've got a really limited range, which is why it's so hard for Japanese to pick up other languages, because they don't have the muscles to make the sounds like with their faces.
Yeah.
But coming in, everybody has the muscles in their faces and their mouths to speak Japanese because it's so limited. There's only like 2 grammar tenses. There's only 2 types of verbs. There's no future tense. There's only past and present. It's like Indonesian, you know, in terms of the simplicity of the grammar and simplicity of the pronunciation. And if you just learn in like the middle level of politeness, which is the easiest way to teach it, it's not hard at all. It's just that they mess it up by making it more complicated. One, with the politeness culture and you know, the moving politeness culture, and 2, with the half-assed way that they imported Chinese. Those are the things that make it really hard. But yeah, you know. But if you just want to speak, if you want to focus on coming in, and there's a lot of people who are getting a girlfriend and picking up that way, yeah, you can get pretty fluent pretty fast. It's actually not very complicated.
Yeah, you can do that with any language. I mean, getting girlfriend material, but at that level though, to be honest, and I've seen this happen in a lot of countries that I've traveled to, is that when you've reached that level of like girlfriend getting, you sort of hit a ceiling of your own language. But then you also have to realize that it might not be a fair relationship, in the sense that
that's a complicated,
she will probably maybe be using you, at least for the first little while, as an English learning partner, exchange partner, right? But I mean, it's not to say that things can't go further and you find that there's common interest, and, you know, like, you both like to travel, you both have an interest of like building a family together. But when you only reach that dating material of language, you really hit a ceiling very quickly, because if you don't have any depth behind it, there's like, you're not talking to the really interesting people.
there is a funny thing with Japanese, by the way, as well, that the way that the words, the vocabulary, there are female words and male words in Japanese. It might be the same in Chinese.
No.
So there is a, okay, well, there is in Japanese. The way that you say I, the words that you select for certain common expressions are different between women and men.
Yeah.
And so if you learn by imitation from your girlfriend, you're gonna give a certain impression, which actually it's kind of funny. There's a Roppongi. There's a part of Tokyo where white guys go looking for Japanese girls and Japanese girls go looking for white guys. But
that's the Roppongi district.
That is correct.
Ah, okay. So because this is a famous district that everyone talks about.
Yeah, this is the place everyone talks about. But it's kind of funny. You can always tell people who learn the Japanese at Roppongi because they you know, they not that there's anything wrong with that sort of thing, but they sound like they want to be women, you know, like,
yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny because a lot of the girlfriends deliberately don't fix it because otherwise they'll go, you know, it makes them less attractive to other people. So that was always kind of a funny thing. The other funny thing is in Japan, you know, there's so many dialects. Like, for example, from New Zealand, the government of New Zealand, when they were teaching us all Japanese and sending us to Japan to sell sheep and apples, they apparently New Zealand did some research and they realized that although Tokyo is the biggest city, the port of Kobe is connected equidistant from like Kyoto and Osaka and like 3 or 4 massive cities that as a whole, actually, you can reach more Japanese consumers. And there's a big port there where we'd import our stuff. So they said, don't send your shipments to Tokyo, send it to Kobe because you can actually access more people in Kansai. So the result was as well, a lot of New Zealanders that I met who are fluent in Japanese speak the dialect of Osaka. They don't speak the standard Japanese,
right?
Which I always thought was yeah, it's kind of funny. If you pick it up, I'm sure it's the same if you have people who pick up Chinese in Shanghai or whatever, and they go to Beijing, they'll be a little bit, people, it's kind of cool, but at the same time, people might not look at that the same way.
Right. The big thing about learning Mandarin Chinese, like Putonghua, is that Beijing has standardized the Mandarin language. And this is part political, part cultural, part the unification of the Chinese people and nation, in that Mandarin Chinese is standard. There is no difference. So if you go north to south, east to west, it doesn't matter. It's going to be the same pronunciation. Now, within that, there are dialects: Shanghaiese, Cantonese. You have in Mongolia, Xinjiang. All these different places have their own dialects, and even Dongbei, like northeast, closer to Japan, they have their own dialect. But the standard Mandarin Chinese is what the government issues all of its proclamations in. So and I saw, I think with Japanese, there is a system. There's like a government official Tokyo dialect that you learn if you're a student of Japanese, but you could pick and choose what you actually want to focus on. But when you choose to learn Mandarin Chinese, you're learning the government sanctioned Putonghua, which is what Beijing speaks, basically. No difference.
I'm sure it's the same in China. It's the same everywhere. Actually, people take pride in their local accents, right? I'm sure it's the same in Canada. Yeah, in Japan, it's true that the standard Japanese is what if I go down to Osaka and say, I'm sorry, I only learned standard Japanese, they'll get really offended and say, we were the capital first.
Wow.
But yeah, standard Japanese is associated a little bit with the centralized, the centralization of control in Japan as well, that preceded World War II and whatnot, which people generally came to the conclusion was a bad thing. And there's a little bit like when you take regions of Japan that have a bit of local pride, they feel like if you say standard Japanese, that's like Tokyo suppressing and holding us down a little bit. I'm sure it's the same in other places.
I think that's, I see that in Canada. Like we have the indigenous peoples who are saying, you forced us to learn English in these reserve systems, and basically our languages and cultures are dying as a result. I mean, I don't want to say it's the same thing happening in China, but something similar is happening when the government says, okay, there's Mandarin and then that's it. But I do see it though. For all of its faults, the idea of having a standard language, this is what Esperanto was supposed to be.
Right,
like it was supposed to be the language that everyone learned, that everyone can communicate.
Yeah. And look, in a country of what, 1.3 billion people, you need common, you know, I mean, how, without getting into politics, I mean, how they manage to just administer, right? You know, a country as diverse and as big and with so many people. I'm sympathetic functionally to the idea of having a common, at least a common, you know, intermediary language, so someone from Inner Mongolia can talk to someone from southern China.
Yeah.
But certainly I'm sure it's a thing there as well, where people get sensitive when they feel like they're being encroached on. In Japan, you know, people take pride in their dialects, but it was also true that when those people come to Tokyo, or when they're in a job interview, or when they're on TV, except for Kansai, Kansai people will speak Kansai dialect on TV because it's kind of popular, like as a comedic dialect. But apart from that, everyone kind of suppresses their dialects.
Oh, okay. So two things. First, your name, but like Hikosaemon, but then also you said you're in Japan for like 22 years. And the reason like those are sort of correlated questions is because here in China, a lot of my students, a lot of the people I meet are basically, they love Japan. They love Japanese culture. Everyone loves Japanese culture. It sucks people in, and a lot of them, a few of them, it takes in and it brings them to the country and they stay there. So like, what got you into Japan, Japanese, and your name, Hikosaemon, how you adopted that?
Sure. So on the first question, ironically and funnily, so my father was in the New Zealand Army when I was a kid. And so we moved around a lot. And New Zealand used to have an army base in Singapore. So I spent a lot of time as a kid living in Singapore, and I lived inside a Singaporean army camp, which was in the north of the island in a very traditional Chinese neighborhood called Nisun. So my school, I was going to a camp school, but, you know, New Zealand's not like the American military. We don't have whole cities built around the camps. You know, we actually live inside the Singaporean community. And I'd go on a bus through Chinese neighborhoods to a little school that was for New Zealand kids. But I remember being surrounded by Chinese characters and this culture. I loved my time in Singapore so much that everything after that, I mean, imagine New Zealand, I'm sure, has a lot in common with Winnipeg, although not as cold. But when you live in country towns in Australia and New Zealand, and suddenly you go to a place like Singapore and you live there for 2 years, and then you go back to country towns in Winnipeg, you know, you kind of like, you pine for the stimulation.
Yeah.
So that was what it was like for me. So I had in my head, ever since I went back to New Zealand after Singapore, was I wanted to live in a place like Singapore again, and I wanted to learn Chinese. And it was just funny because at the time that I was going through the school system, Britain had just cut off Canada and New Zealand economically because they were going all in on the EU. So in New Zealand, we had to figure out where to sell our apples and our sheep.
Right.
And the government watched a couple of, 1990s movies about Japanese business taking over the world and said, okay, everybody, we're all learning Japanese now. And they started teaching all the kids Japanese. And I wanted to learn Chinese. And the irony is now they're teaching Chinese to everyone. Now they're convinced it's China. But back in the early 90s, just before the bubble burst, they said, okay, we're going all in on Japan. And I was caught up in that wave. So I took Japanese partly because we were forced to. And I thought it'd be cool because they have Chinese characters and maybe it's an indirect path to like eventually getting to Chinese. And it just happened that when I went on a school exchange to Japan, in high school, I was like, oh, well, maybe this place is pretty cool too. And I kind of switched paths just because I was on the Japan path. But it was actually out of interest in China specifically that I got on the Japanese train.
China would be happy to hear that. All the Chinese people listening are like, see, that, there you go.
Although that was, to be clear, that was traditional Chinese. That was Singapore, China, so different, more like Chinese Taipei and places like that. But
which is the expats from the mainland China that fled all the other stuff that was going on at that time. Yes.
Well, and they skipped out all so they still have all the culture which isn't in mainland anymore as well, which I must admit I liked a lot. But I was definitely attracted to that culture. But in terms of the name, I don't know if people do this in China. I assume they must. Especially when you're new and you're learning the language and you think, I'd love to have a local version of a name, or I'd like to write my name in Chinese characters and figure out a nice proxy. So I just took my real name. And I kind of picked out I used a couple of different variations of characters first. Like I wanted to have a Chinese character signature.
Right.
And somebody suggested that it used to be that, I mean, people have figured it out anyway quite often. My name is Simon. And it's funny because Simon in Japanese is a suffix that was used for like samurai names. So it would never be on its own. It would never be a name on its own. But there were a bunch of people like Sir Galahad. You know, if you look at 16th century samurai names, half of them are names that they're really long names. Japanese people have long names compared to Chinese people. And they offered in with this 3-character Nanta Zaimon, like as a suffix.
Right.
And the kind of one of those famous names is this famous like advisor to one of the shoguns called Hikosaemon. And it was like a commonly used name for kind of very smart, like Confucian scholars and stuff like that. So people said, you should use the characters that guy used for Simon. And whenever I explained it, I'd say I'm Simon like Hikosaemon, and it kind of caught on where, okay, I'll just call myself Hikosaemon. And the funny thing was when I used it, everyone online started calling me Hiko. And I was like, no, it's the other part. But it kind of caught on, and I must admit, I kind of liked it. So, and you know, not people haven't registered it. So that's how I got that.
So what does Hiko mean then?
It's just a name. I couldn't tell you what it means. I can write it, but it's dude. It's literally Galahad. I mean, what does Sir Galahad mean? You know, it's a 15th century samurai name. That's all I can sort of tell you.
Wow.
It's kind of cool. And it gave me the characters. All that said, I don't write my name in kanji at all anymore, but just as an online moniker, it kind of stuck.
Right. So then when you're writing your name, you use a different name then. Like Hikosaemon is sort of like your basically personality.
Yeah. And you know, like again, when you're fresh off the boat, you know, I wanted to write my name in Japanese everywhere and have lots of interesting conversations. It gets a little bit tiresome though, like at the bank every time when, you know, you want to impress them and you have a 10-minute conversation about it. And then at the end of it, they ask you to just write it in English, please. And, you know, you do that for 2 years and eventually, you know, I've been here 22 years, you get a little bit tired. So you just, screw it, I'll just write it in English. So I kind of gave it up, but that's where it originated from.
So, okay, with that then, with 2 years, and then you're like, okay, I got to figure this out already. Would you say that that's very common for like a lot of foreigners who either in Japan or China sometimes, but like, I need a Japanese name already?
Well, I think if I'd come 10 years later, I would have been one of those people looking for a kanji tattoo or something like that. Terrible idea. But, you know, I think this is a more erasable and less life regretting to the same problem. You know, you're just excited and you want to, you know, to me, that was one of the things I'm learning. I'm basically trying to be Japanese. As when I got here, I was going really deep with the language, and sure, I'd like to get a cool, everyone's writing their name in kanji. I'd like to get one for myself. And I did that, but you know, it was just a gimmick. It is funny though, you're talking about the first 2 years though. There are a lot of things, I don't know if this is the same for China or for you, but there are a lot of things that as a foreigner, in Japan, it's funny, they call particularly Caucasian foreigners where we do get kind of special treatment, like a celebrity treatment in comparison to other people.
Yes.
But they call us pandas, like especially when we're inside Japanese companies. You know, in Japan, it is kind of terrible. And I guess it might not be the same in China because you have all the pandas. But like in Japan, when China wanted to be friends with Japan, they sent Japan a panda. And that panda was like the most popular thing in Japan for about like 2 years. There was like panda mania about everything. You know, people would queue for days at the zoo to see the panda, and there were like panda products and everything. But, you know, Japan has these extreme booms and busts. And the kind of joke about the panda thing is that when a new foreigner joins the company, you're the panda, you're like the flavor of the month. But you stay there a little bit too long and the boom goes off, and then they start, hey, can this guy actually do anything? And then a new foreigner comes and they celebrate the new foreigner. So you have that. And so when you join and you kind of, everyone's extremely nice and excited that you're around when you join. But that kind of wears off. And
well, that's usually after 6 or 7 months, though. I mean, because I've lived in a few different countries, and it's usually 6 or 7 months. They're like, okay, that's awesome, great, you're here. And then at that 7 month, not only does your luster wear off, but then your admiration or your what do you call it, enamoring enamorance.
Yeah.
It was enamored.
Yeah.
And when you're enamored, you're with that country, that culture, and you stop. And I remember when I was in South Korea, that was the first country I lived in, that basically they said, you'll know at month number 7, whether or not you will stay another year. And at month 7, I'm like, I'm done. I gotta go. But it wasn't because of South Korea. It was because of me. I want to keep on going. And when I lived in South Korea, I was exposed to that teaching English. I'm like, you mean as a Canadian passport holder and a native English speaker, I can live and work just about anywhere in the world?
Yeah.
I'm going. Like, then I was let off the chain. I was gone. There was no holding me back at that point. I'm like, if I could go anywhere, then I would just keep going until I couldn't go any further. So,
yeah, I get that. But what was funny about when I first arrived and I was in that panda stage or whatever, and particularly in my first couple of companies, I was the only foreigner around, and that was by my own choice as well. I wanted to go deep.
That's good.
But so there were things like in New Zealand, I'm sure Canada as well, you know, we have a ladies first culture. If you're coming up to the door at the same time as a lady, you will typically stand back or maybe hold the door or whatever. And it's just, have that beaten into you since you're a kid, and you just do it without thinking. So when you do it in Japan, it's kind of funny. In Japan, if there's any difference around that at all, it'll generally be, particularly if there's like an older guy, everybody will let the guy go through, but certainly the women will. And generally women tend to be more differential. And when I was in a couple of old-fashioned companies, so what would happen was on the first day, I go up to an elevator or go up to a door at the same time as a woman, and they're expecting me to walk on through. But I'm trained to let them walk on through. So we'd both stop. And she would say, oh, please go ahead. And I'd say, oh, no, you go ahead. And they would go, oh, you're a foreigner. You treat women really well. Isn't that wonderful? And I'd go, yeah, it is really wonderful. Aren't I great? And then they'll go in, and then I'll go in, and then she'll smile at me, and it'll be, oh, aren't I wonderful? And, you know, and that'll happen 3 times a day. And, you know, over time,
that gets really annoying.
Yeah. You know, you have a tough week. You're doing a lot of overtime. You're kind of tired. You're late for a meeting. And you're walking up to an elevator, and you know what's going to happen. And you know that you're about to lose another 10 seconds of your life. And it was kind of nice first, but I'm tired and I can't deal with this. And they're not going to say anything if I just walk in. They expect me to do it. So at some point you just stop doing it and you start becoming the old Japanese man who just walks onto the elevator. Yeah. And I must admit, there are a lot of things like that were kind of nice to do, but I just had to let go. But the funniest thing was, partway through my time in Japan, I went back to New Zealand to go and get qualified as a lawyer. I went to a little training college for my lawyer accreditation. And I realized how long I'd been away. Because there was exactly the same situation in reverse back in New Zealand, where there was like a woman about to go to a door, and a man was at the door, and he was holding the door for her, and I wasn't even looking. I just walked between both of them and walked through. And the woman looked at me and said, at least someone around here is a gentleman. I was like, oh my God, I can't live here anymore.
I'm done. You know, I'm living overseas has destroyed me. Yeah.
I've become a chauvinist.
I get that the same with in terms of like who has the right of way, and I have to be careful when I go back to my hometown, because my hometown only has 700,000 people, and you know you can swing your arms wildly and not hit anybody going down the street or like down the sidewalk. In Beijing, you're going to hit someone eventually, and they'd be like, "Why is this crazy foreigner flapping his arms all over the place?" Yeah. But in Winnipeg, it's like, when you come across someone else, you do have to have a bit more legal. You can't even get close to someone. Like if you walk within a foot of someone, people are like, "What the? Get back! What's wrong with you? You assaulting me? Or you get away from me, you strange man?" Whereas in China, it's like, I've had people. I wrote a blog post about this years when you're walking and they will literally just walk right in front of you. It's gotten to the point where I try to kick their heels, and then with that, it's like, it's kind of like one of those things. If you don't break face, nothing's wrong. So if you kick their ankle and you're like, whatever, you keep walking, no one's any worse. But if they do notice, and if you ever do break face, then you have to say, oh, 不好意思, or 对不起, 对不起, 我不知道, you know, and it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. But even though you as a foreigner, you're going, I see you. And you as a human being must see me. There must be awareness of me as a people. I can't not exist. You know, and you saw that we were going towards the same area.
I've got a funny one for you. So I'm from New Zealand, and I've been in towns much smaller than that even. Although I live longest, I went to university in Auckland, and Auckland has 1 million people, but it's really spread out. Auckland's actually 1.5 times bigger than Tokyo in terms of land area. But wow. Tokyo, where Tokyo fits 30 million, Auckland fits 1.5 million. And it's got a business district that is like the size of one central train station in Tokyo out of like dozens. I mean, and Beijing is, of course, even bigger scale. I mean, the scale of Shanghai and Beijing, I've lived in Tokyo, and they blow me away. So I know that we're both used to crowds. But one thing that got me, so I lived, when I was at university, the university campus of Auckland, it's a horrible university in the sense that there isn't a nice campus. It's just a bunch of random buildings in the central city. And I had a part-time job at a Japanese souvenir shop also in the downtown. So I got an apartment like in the downtown where I could just walk to everything. So the funny thing is, and this is embarrassing to say, the biggest city in New Zealand, and it has 1 million people, but it has one main street. There is a main street called Queen Street that you just walk on. It's like 1 kilometer long. And if at the bottom is where my part-time job is, and at the top of the hill, at the top of the street is where my university is. So I'd walk up and down the street, the main street of New Zealand, you know, every day. And it's true, maybe not flap your arms, but what you would do is, because I worked in a souvenir shop with half of the Japanese population of Auckland, you know, it was selling stuff, and knowing Japanese people from university, and the fact that everyone going to university is getting off their buses on Queen Street and walking to the campus. And, you know, and I know a lot of people there. I could not walk from top to bottom of Queen Street without seeing somebody that I know.
Yes.
In a city of 1 million people, it's impossible. So when you're in New Zealand, you basically cannot, and if you're in a city like Christchurch, the second biggest city, which has 600,000 people, you cannot walk down a street without just being aware of the crowd, because you don't want someone to think that you're ignoring them. You don't want someone to see you and you miss them, and they'll think that you're snobbing them or something. So basically what you do is you walk, but you're always scanning the crowd because you're expecting to see someone that you know. And especially, and I would be tuned in that if I saw Japanese people, I'd double check, because maybe I do really know them. And I'll, you know, you say, hello, hey, how's it going? You know, and I'd see people from my university, hey, how's it going? And basically that walk would not be done in the busiest part of New Zealand, on the main street in the biggest city of New Zealand. I could not do that walk without bumping into someone that I know. So when I got to Tokyo, and I went to Shibuya, the biggest, you know, the big crazy intersection and everything. I remember the first couple of times I was there, I got to Shibuya and I walked for like 10 minutes, and I was with my friends, and I said, I don't know why, I'm sorry, but I need to sit down. And I couldn't figure out why myself. And I sat down, and I'd walked only for 10 minutes through this crowded place. And I couldn't figure out, why am I completely drained and exhausted? And it took a minute to realize I was trying to scan the crowd.
Right.
I was trying to scan every face in the crowd, just automatically without realizing. And, you know, this is a place with like, you know, like Shinjuku Station. When I went to Shinjuku, that's the busiest train station in the world. Like 5 million people go through this train station every day. And I was going through this train station trying to scan all 5 million faces. And I just had to sit down after 10 minutes of walking, because I couldn't, my brain was just completely fried. And I didn't, it took me a while, it took me a wee while to realize, oh, I'm doing that. I need to stop doing that. And this is the thing, I'm sure it's the same in Beijing. You need to just, in the end, there's so many people, you just have to switch off. You're just in a cone here. And honestly, there could be an alien or a walking crocodile, and I wouldn't know how I could be pressed against them on the train.
You know, someone would have to like just take a picture with the camera, post it on the news feed, and you'd be like, oh, there's a oh, that's right here. There's a crocodile. Hey, look at me, Mom. Yeah, there's a crocodile in the subway. Why is that doing it? I shouldn't be there.
But that need to switch off in crowds, that's something I had to learn after coming here, and I had to learn it because it was so exhausting, and I couldn't figure out why I was so tired all the time. So yeah, that
now that you mention it, I do remember one of like just ever moving away from Winnipeg was that there is that face scanning where you're always looking, and it's always made me wonder how another foreigner can miss me in Beijing. And that's when I think I'm getting snubbed. Because whenever I see someone like a white face or a black face, I'm like, oh, foreigner, that's when I scan. I'm like, do I know this person, right? Because who knows? And then maybe there's like that, you know, that common nod. You're like, hey, what's going on. Even if we don't even know each other, is it gone? But then like if it's Chinese people, I mean, they just all blend in, and it's not just because of the faces, it's just because you have to ignore everything.
You can't process.
It's impossible. And that's always makes me wonder why foreigners would not know that I'm walking right beside them. I have to be the one that says, hey, how's it going? Who knows? Maybe I'm just a forgettable person. That makes me sad a little bit.
The other thing that's really changed with Tokyo is certainly when I first got here around 2000, in the late 90s, we did stick out like sore thumbs, and we were rare, even in Tokyo. Well, in Tokyo, outside of Tokyo, people might be surprised if you can use chopsticks, or they'll tell you you're first foreigner. But in Tokyo, it wasn't at that level, but you would notice, and certainly we would stand out a lot. But the thing was, Japan used to be so. I went backpacking around Japan when I was in university. And I remember it was just laughable. It was great for learning Japanese because you needed to use it, because there was a lot of domestic tourism infrastructure, but there was no international tourism infrastructure anywhere. So I'd go to an information center and there would be no English information. The tourist information person normally couldn't speak anything but Japanese. Yeah. And they wouldn't even tell me where hotels that I could use. That were not on their approved list, that they were getting kickbacks from and stuff like that. So when the Prime Minister announced in 2002, Koizumi, when he said, at that time, Japan had like 100,000 tourists per year. And they said, we're going to change that.
Wow.
And they said, we're going to boost that number to 10 million in 10 years. And I was like, wow, you have no idea what you're talking about. You guys are so far from having any clue where to start on that. Like, it's kind of what was fun about Japan. It was a safe but awkward place to go around. You'd bump into things, but it was the difficulty. You were never in danger. You're never going to go down the wrong street in Japan. So you'd bundle through. That was what was fun about Japan, is that you were like on an alien planet, but where you're not going to get mugged.
Yep.
But like, yeah, screw me. Japan pulled it off like crazy. I mean, I thought it was a joke when they said that they were going to boost tourism, but before pre-COVID, we had like 30 million tourists last year. And the foreign population in Japan went from like 300,000 in the whole of the country when I got here to more than 2 million now. So there are like now 7 times more foreigners than there were when I got here. So that's the other thing now. Now it really is increasingly common in Tokyo anyway. Like, we're increasingly normal. It's still, of course, you get into the countryside, of course, it still is going to be a little bit different. And you'll get the panda treatment. But yeah, new arrivals in Tokyo don't get the panda treatment that I got anymore. Which is probably for the best, but
I came across an old tweet or a Facebook post from my time. I was in Japan back in 2016 for 2 weeks, and there was 2 things I noticed. The major differences between Japan, like Tokyo and Beijing and China, was that number one, Japan is so clean you can't even throw out your garbage. Number 2 was in China, it's, hey, everyone, spot the foreigner. In Japan, it's, hey, everyone, spot the Japanese person. Because there are none. I mean, like, there's just so few that you're like, hey, there's a Japanese person, and then there's foreigner, Japanese person, foreigner. But I mean, I was in the tourist districts and whatnot. So I mean, I was in like a Asakusa, or as I called it, Asakusa.
Okay. Then that would make sense. Yeah. And for me as well, that like, when I've only been to Asakusa a couple of times, but when I first went there were maybe a couple of Chinese tours and stuff like that, but there were not really noticeable foreigners, certainly in the early days. And now you go there and it is just wall to wall foreigners down. So yeah, it's just amazing how when they focused on doing that well and they just plugged away at it, they pulled it off. But I never thought they were capable of it. So yeah. For me, one thing I found really interesting, I haven't been to Beijing. I've been to Shanghai, Dalian, and Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong being a bit special. But one thing about Hong Kong, I thought is clean and modern and has this, I thought
beautiful city.
Japan. But I found the subway system. One thing I liked about Hong Kong was, and it's something, how you don't notice something sometimes until they're absent. In Japan, even when you're in crowded trains, and even though the trains are silent, nobody talks. You don't talk to your friends on trains because you don't want to annoy other people. But what's funny is everybody kind of is aware of everybody else. Like, they won't look directly at people, but there's this huge social conformity. If someone's being noisy, for example, or somebody's putting makeup on the train, everyone's looking out the side of their eyes, but they're giving evil eyes, you know.
Right.
And it's kind of, so when you get the drunk, you know, American army guys or the tourists or whatever, obnoxious tourists coming on the train, they probably don't even notice, but I'm standing there and I know what's going on, and I'm looking at everybody going like this. And I'm thinking, oh shit, I don't want to be like that. And it's, you know, there's this kind of like social, like the Japanese are hugely aware. There's this huge sort of social awareness of what's going on. And when I went to Hong Kong, and I was in the same situation on the train, where you've got loud people on their cell phones talking and kids running up and down and stuff like that, I really noticed nobody is paying attention to anybody. Like, it's crowded and it looks the same. But I realized the eyes on everybody and the judgmental eyes on everybody out the side, but not talking or confronting, that you have in Japan everywhere, that you just become used to. To me, it felt like, wow, you know, Hong Kong really, and I think this is what you hear about Chinese culture, that people, it's ironic. China is the socialist country that is very individualistic, and Japan is the capitalist country that actually is extremely culturally socialist.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was in Hong Kong, I was like, wow, people here do not give a shit about like what other people are doing, where you really feel the pressure of that all the time. So I felt this huge sort of lifting of this kind of stress a little bit in Hong Kong in comparison. That was really interesting.
Yeah, if you ever came to Beijing, especially now with the crowds, I agree that when you walk onto that subway, people don't know if you are there. Like they're like, hey, I'm bumping into something. Is that the pole? Oh, it's a person. Oh, okay, I should probably shift over, you know, and that.
Yeah.
And Japan has packed subways during rush hour as well. But like even outside of it, right?
That's a good point. So you're right. People will ignore everyone around and they'll crush and whatever. And everyone will kind of be passive and be neutral unless someone is doing something wrong. And if someone is doing something wrong, everybody notices. You know, it'll be rare for someone to confront someone about it. But for example, if someone's talking on a mobile phone on a train, when there are posters saying do not talk on mobile phones on trains, if somebody in the crush picks up a mobile phone, normally they will audibly say, I'm very sorry, I can't talk to you because I'm on a train, I have to hang up now. And then everyone will be talking, but okay, apologizing. But if someone's carrying on the conversation, the looks that go, and that's actually, it's actually not unlike New Zealand, the social pressure and the social judging. But you know, if you are sitting with your legs apart, or you're opening a wide newspaper, or you're talking on the phone, or doing stuff that's not socially allowed,
acceptable,
you know, even in those crashes, so long as you're just being passive and silent and not breaking any rules, you're not there.
Yeah.
But the moment you do something like you talk loudly, or boom. So yeah, it's kind of funny, and I've become so used to it. This is the thing. So now it really jars me when it's not there.
Yeah, you become deadened to it. It's just like, yeah, someone. The thing with China and talking on the phone, I don't know if Japanese people talk quietly on the phone, but the Chinese, and I think South Korea had this too, it was the escalating cell phone conversation. It was it would start soft, and then it just got louder and louder and louder. And it's just to the point, it's like, you know, there's two things you can do here, sir or ma'am. Call them back. Or two, you realize that your first voice that you used, if they heard that, you could use the same type of voice. You don't need to go any louder. Is it the same thing in Japan?
No. No. So the thing is, and this is where as a New Zealander, I kind of feel, the way in which I feel comfortable with Japanese people is that Japanese, like New Zealanders, are very self-conscious.
Right.
They are mindful of how they appear to other people, and not wanting to appear obnoxious. Whereas, and I must admit, this is what I like about going to Australia. People don't care how they look. And when I go to Hong Kong, it was the same thing. When I saw a loud person talking obnoxiously loudly on the phone, no doubt about some offshore, you know, investment he was making or something, I'm like, wow, people here do not give a shit. I love this. You know, like it was liberating, because from New Zealand and Japan, I'm just used to it. And this is it. Japanese will be, and someone in Japan, it's not like they exist. There might be some obnoxious person or some young person who doesn't know the rules yet. But the societal hazing that you'll be subject to for being that loud person on the phone. And sooner or later, some old guy's going to slap you or do something and, you know, straighten you out.
Yeah.
So
We are running out of time because I know you got to get going. If I could ask you one other question, because we're talking about this in terms of like the expression and being able to express. So when people go to your YouTube site, one of the first videos that they encounter is Farrell's clap your hands if you're happy. Right?
Yeah, happy. Yeah.
Right. So there are two scenes that you've got a bunch of foreigners. Or non-Chinese people, or some Japanese people that were in the video, but primarily a lot of foreign people living in Japan, I imagine. And there was two that stuck out the most to me. There was the guy in, I guess it was I don't know if they were red underwear or if they were red pants, red shorts.
Yes.
With he had glasses and a bunny hat. So that was the first one.
Yeah.
And then the other one that was, he played a few shots in that role, in that video. But then the other guy happens towards the end of the video. There's a man in a green suit, and a neon green suit, and two, I guess it's girls in bunny costumes that are doing this little bunny hop. Now, in terms of expression, first of all, who were those people? Second of all, not that you need to out them, but second of all, like, do you see that Japan has always had that sort of ability to express itself, and you've lived there for a while? You don't see that in China. Like, you would not see foreigners dressing up in bunny costumes. I know a few people who might, but it wouldn't be in terms of any sort of artistic expression as you were doing. So what do you see in that sort of expression of foreign culture?
So first of all, that video is basically a compilation of people who either are themselves YouTubers based in Japan in the international community, or actually just people who watch my channel who I said, hey, send me a 5-second clip of dancing to this track and I'll edit it together into a montage and we can all see ourselves. It'll be fun. And it got a great response, and the video came out wonderful. The person in the costume with the underwear and so on, that was a guy called kind of a character called Mr. Jones, and he was an Australian guy who was both as a kind of personal goal and as a subject of a documentary. He was an Australian who came out to Japan in order to see if he could make it big, if he could land a job getting featured on Japanese TV by sort of being an outrageous foreigner. So he was sort of doing this for more than a year, but he also had his friends were like recording the whole like journey as a documentary, and it got released as a feature film.
Wow.
And I met him with the release of that film. In fact, that was before that. So I guess we were technically part of his journey, but so he was trying to boost his online presence as part of this sort of social experiment that he was making of himself. So that was actually, that person is super interesting. And the movie about his thing is really interesting.
What's the movie called? Do you know it offhand?
No, I know his character name was Mr. Jones. I can dig it. I'll share the link and you can put it in the description. Because I think you can actually watch it on Vimeo. I'm not sure now, but yeah, it's good. It's good. The other thing is, and the documentary it's his own journey, but he also interviews other foreigners it's called Big in Japan.
Okay.
That's the title, Big in Japan. And he actually, while doing his own journey, he features 3 other famous foreigners, and he actually interviews them about their journeys and how they became big in Japan while he's trying to make it himself, and he's trying to get advice from them. And it's a well done documentary. It's actually, I'm sure, would be interesting to your audience actually, just with the Japan twist. The other people in the bunny costume, I think I know who you mean, and honestly, I don't know who they are. I think they were just people. They were people who were nice enough to watch my own videos and submitted a clip. So I couldn't tell you anything about them other than they're awesome for contributing the clip. There is a culture, I don't know if you have this in China, but there is a culture which kind of divides the foreign community a little bit about the gaijin smash, the idea that if you're a foreigner, you can act a little bit more rowdy and obnoxious than a local.
It's true. Yeah. But even then, the government sort of has been cracking down on like public behavior in the last year or 2 years.
And the same here, like there's a thing in Japan around Halloween that there's like a bunch of foreigners that it'd be fun to get drunk on the circular train around Tokyo and having a party on the train and being noisy and so on. And it really breaks all of the social rules, and it really annoys a lot of the people who ride the trains. And it started to get national media attention, and the police started like standing on the trains here as well and trying to discourage it. So, and this is the other thing in your profession, you know, there are short-term people who are traveling the world often to drink and party as much as possible and do it, you know, on a budget, speaking English and not caring about the consequences because they're going to go home. And there are people who are really trying to establish a life in the countries, and they're really, you know, they hate it when someone else makes it more difficult for them by being dicks. And, you know,
don't be a dick. You just don't do it.
That's the PSA message. Yeah, it makes it like landlords will stop renting out to foreigners when they have bad experiences with foreigners, and they're foreigners who don't give a crap about anyone else, and they're tossing garbage off the balcony, and they're being obnoxious, and they ruin it for the people who come after. So there is a thing generally where there are foreigners who go a little bit crazy with the partying thing, and you know, it can be fun, but it can go a little bit too far. But the thing about Japan generally is that I think you're also getting at is that while Japan is very conformist and there are all these social rules and these behavior rules, it is kind of funny that Japanese in their own way, one thing I like about Japan is that in New Zealand, people are so self-aware and conscious of what other people are thinking that people are kind of like, you don't want to show off too much, but you also don't want to be too cheesy or corny. Like people are really aware of how they're being seen. And so there's this kind of, it's not, you know, you're trying to strike this balance of not being a poser, but at the same time not being a dork.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you, so even if you like a cheesy music tune or you like a bright fashion or something like that, you can't really do it in New Zealand because you'll be worried about how your friends will react. There is a nice thing about Japan that I really like, which is that Japanese people will really openly like be into heavy metal, but they'll go and buy a CD of a children's album that's really popular, and you know they'll go to they won't be so self-aware that they won't allow themselves to enjoy stuff that's just good or fun. And I really like that about Japan. And yeah, Japanese are great when it comes to parties. I've been to the music festivals and everything here. The fact that, you know, in New Zealand, yeah, well, you know, in New Zealand or Australia, half the people will be on drugs, there'll be fights, there'll be, if you get too many drunk people in a space, you know, it kind of gets nasty.
Yeah.
In Japan, you know, you're in a park on Hanami season, everyone is drunk, 100,000 people drunk in a park. You need the army to control that in New Zealand. Everyone is just having a good time, and you know, people will dance, people will wear a silly costume, and everyone is like, isn't that great? There are no police, there's no trouble.
And the only people who are fighting are the foreigners.
Yeah, quite often. You know, of course, there are Japanese people who do that, but by and large, you know, it's
it's not as much.
Just people being cool. So, you know, I like that. I like the lack of self-consciousness about those kind of things. Like it's okay to be a bit of a dork. And I guess the reason is that in Japan, everything is in cliques, but there's just so many people. And in Tokyo, it's such a big city that if you're in the wearing purple, you know, if you're in the purple wig and dresses clique, you know, you can find 10 other people in the same interest group in a certain train station and go hang out with them, and it's all cool. And people generally, so long as you're in a group and you're being considerate about how you go about it, you know, you can go dance and go. Yeah. So you can find a place. This is, I think, for when you come from a place like Canada or New Zealand where it's a low population, yeah, just to be in a place full of people and where there are all these niches and all these cliques, you know, and people can express themselves a bit more, and that's kind of nice. I mean, it's regulated, but at the same time, there's social regulation of how you express yourself, but you can find a safe place for pretty much any type of expression, and I think that's what's really interesting about Japan. That's why so much great culture comes out of here.
I think that's why a lot of people love the Japanese culture and want to go to Japan. They love their experience there for sure. So.
And China, by the way, as well. I mean, it's apart from the fact that it's obviously in spite of politics right now, which is stupid, but you know, it's clearly where everything's going and the way that China's come up. And by the way, also nothing makes me happier than one of my last jobs involved managing a team based in Dalian and going back and forth. And Dalian is sort of the city within China that's the most Japan friendly.
I like Dalian. Dalian's a nice city. I know people who live there, and they're all like, it's just a better city.
It's a nice place. But also the people there, you know, it's got a really interesting history. And that's where, if you want to learn Japanese in China, you should go to Dalian because they've got the best Japanese language courses in China, and Japanese outsourcing centers are all based up there.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of funny. I was always like, is it okay to ask if you like Japan? Like, is that sensitive? Because I know lots of people who don't like Japan, like from Korea and from Hong Kong, and people will say that they don't like Japan. And I know it gets sensitive, but it's really, nothing makes me happier than to see them getting along. And I think there's so much in common in Japan. So it has so much linkages with Chinese culture historically. So yeah.
With that, like in terms of like, do people like Japan? You hear it from the older generation that might be a little bit more suspect because they lived through and they heard it from their grandparents. And you hear like a lot of the, as the United States makes World War II like war movies about like terrorists who are always unnamed brown people with beards, or they're like Chinese or the Germans. China makes war movies against Japanese. Like that is their go-to war movie. So it kind of fosters it at some point, a little bit. But at the same time, the younger groups, like all the university kids are like, no, I love Japan. Manga, I love manga. I want to learn Japanese. They're like, English, I do because I have to. Japanese, I do because I love to. It's just that enamorment with that culture and their output. So I don't see the same aggressiveness in the younger groups at all. So
yeah, I'm really glad to see that.
All right, it's getting late here. You got to get going because you want to go to bed, and it's getting close to my bedtime as well. If people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
I'm everywhere. As basically YouTube or Twitter are the best places, and I'm the same moniker everywhere, Hikosaemon. If you want to actually contact me, Twitter message is the best way, but I post stuff there all the time. But if you want to check out my stuff talking about what's going on in Japan every week, I'm on YouTube. I live stream every Sunday night, and the recordings stay up, so you can see those if you're interested. But and thanks for reaching out. It's great to connect. And I love these kind of conversations. I deliberately do not talk about China on my, or one, I want to keep it Japan focused, and two, I don't want to say anything that, is uninformed and, upsets people. I'm happy to upset people talking about Japan, but I don't want to say the thing talking about other countries. So I am interested in China and I follow it, but it's great to talk with someone who's there and to have a conversation like this. It's really fun to share, to compare notes. So thanks for having me.
It was great. And I thought like when I reached out last week, and I was thinking, it'd be great to have sort of a conversation about the different, across the pond, basically. You got Japan over right here, and you got China right over here. And it's like, what is it, two experiences of people living so close to each other, but very far apart in terms of
very different places,
culture and goings on and whatnot. China and the company I work for would not like me talking about the politics, but the language, the culture, everything else is pretty much fair game. The netizens of the world, the Chinese netizens, might take issue with some of the things that have been said or are said or thought, but I think it's a good conversation to have in terms of opening up and bridging that gap between the people who see China in the news and then what China is.
Well, that's it. And this is when I was over in Dalian as well. The Chinese people, they were at pains to, in appropriate settings, let me know. Oh yeah, we talk politics and we have views, and don't think that all that stupid crap you see in the news is actually what we think here. And it was nice that people, I wasn't asking for it at all. I was deliberately being safe. And I think they detected that, and they actually, when we were in a closed room at a hot pot, they sort of said, "Don't worry, dude, it's cool." So that was kind of nice. But I'll tell you what as well, if you ever want to have another conversation and you want me to talk about Japan politics, the great thing about Japan is there's nothing like that. So, there are net nationalists and whatever, like there are in every country in Asia, but that is my shtick. That is what I do every week, and that is what I tweet about. So I'm always happy to talk about that. But thanks I appreciate the chat. It's nice to connect.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. So that's Hikosaemon. You can find him on Twitter and on YouTube as well. And I'll post all of this on the show notes on my website as well. Thank you very much, sir. Have a good night. We'll talk again.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. All right. So I'll end it there with the recording. Awesome. Thank you very much for coming out. I know you actually have to go to bed now. So can I ask you what kind of microphone you're using over there?
This is a Yeti. I actually got this recently. Okay. This was like my, I've been using cheap USB microphones for 10 years, and I felt like I should treat myself finally. So I finally got the heavy duty blue Yeti.
How much did it cost you American dollars? Do you know?
Good question. I can look it up.
Japanese yen, or what was the yen?
Well, honestly, I think it was around $200. But you know what? I think I got it on sale. So actually, I think I got it for about $140.
Oh, that's a good price. Yeah, the USB mics have gotten a lot better since like 10 years ago when they were absolute shit. I bought this. I use the Zoom H4n for my main audio source. And it's my only complaint with it is that like we went just over an hour today. It will cut the file at 59 minutes and 59 seconds, and then it'll stop for like a minute, or sorry, not a minute, like 2 seconds, and it'll start a new file. Yeah. And so I actually have a secondary microphone that's recording. I'll use the Zoom a bit of it and just splice in the audio as I need it. So.
In fact, you know what? I have that exact microphone in the drawer behind me. I used that for a number of years, and then I switched to a Samson SAMSON mic, which I saw a friend using. I thought it had great sound, so I got that. And they're quite small, but it's got quite good sound. But and I used that for 6 or 7 years. But yes, I don't know how it sounds, but to you, but yeah, I thought.
The Yeti sounds fine. That's good. That sounds good so far.
The excuse I used was, if I'm going to be working from home and using this all the time, I might as well improve my audio. It seemed a good excuse to go and upgrade.
Yeah.
But the Zooms are great, and the fact that they're portable as well. And you can plug in external mics to them and stuff as well. That's pretty cool.
Sadly, I don't use it as much as actual people use it. I just use the built-in microphone. The thing I finally started using the compressor and the limiter on board. So I don't have to do so much post-production, which makes my life so much easier. But I don't know why I didn't have the settings on before.
Yeah. No, it is funny when you start out. This and the key to the, well, for me on doing YouTube live streams and posting videos is anyone. This sounds kind of shitty, but it's almost like nowadays. Lots of people who launch channels and they make professional looking content. Like it's not a mystery anymore how to make a great, with an iPhone, you can shoot in good light, video that looks professional, and the editing tools on your iPhone on iMovie, you can actually do really slick editing. And pretty much anyone nowadays can make a dazzling, well edited video. And there are people who do it. But the thing is, this game of doing podcasting or making videos is it's got to be repeatable on your least motivated week.
Yeah.
There are so many people who just crash because they set the bar so high that when they go on a vacation or when they get behind, they just can't face catching it up and they just walk away from it. Yeah. So you've got to figure out what's the best that you can do with the effort that you can sustain when you don't want to do it. And that's if you get a good plug and play setup, something that works well enough and doesn't require any after editing or brushing up, that's what you want.
That's why I like having these long form conversations. I'm like, no, there's no editing. There's no, if you say something, maybe if it's politically sensitive, maybe I'll blank it out. Maybe if I can remember where it is, but it's like, no, I can't. No, I just publish the thing, and it's also sort of my big thing about like the news and the way it is these days. It's just like, it's better to have the full record rather than, an edited journalist approach to it. It's just like, no, our bandwidth isn't a problem. Hardware isn't a problem. Streaming, internet connection, it's not a problem anymore. Publish the thing. Yeah. Just publish the whole thing. Yeah. Let people decide for themselves. All right, cool. Hiko, thank you very much. We will talk again. It's been great meeting you. Great talking to you. All right, have a good night.
Pleasure. Thank you. See you.
Bye. Bye-bye.